Well, today, I've been invited to talk to you guys a little bit about the progress we've made here at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. For those of you who don't know, excuse me here, Texas UTRGV is a federally designated Hispanic serving agricultural college and university, which is a federal designation, not unlike that of a land grant institution or what they call the 1862 or 1890 institutions. This is one of the newest designations by the federal government recognizing the contributions that we make as a university with Hispanic students and offering degrees and studies related to agriculture. So this is a new designation that we have, and we're one of a handful of universities that were kind of the inaugural Hispanic serving ag university. And so, before I get started on our journey, I think it's really appropriate if I start with some of those who may not be familiar with the history of agriculture here in the region. And, I saw this in a museum, of the Museum of South Texas History, in one of the advertisements that went out in 1915 to try and recruit people to immigrate to the region and to help farm the region and expand the region. They advertised this region as the hub of prosperity, where the practical and energetic farmer can work 12 months of the year. And you can see in this drawing here all the things that you can grow throughout the year here in the Rio Grande Valley. And you can actually see the impact of the advertisement, what it had on the population and the dynamics of farms in the region. So if you pay attention to the left side of these graphs, like right after they started doing these advertisements in around 1915, masses moved down here to this region, increasing the number of farms from less than 500 all the way up to more than 7,000 in just Hidalgo County alone in the first 20 years of that recruitment effort. And then the land got divvied up into a number of different farms. And a lot of farmers moved down here with 50 acres, 100 acres or less, and started growing here in the county. And this is currently we have about 2,500 farms in Hidalgo County, maybe about 5,500 farms across the Rio Grande Valley, including the 4 county areas. What's really most interesting, and this is data that we got from the ag census. What's really the most interesting and the thing that requires some examination is the number of Hispanic farmers in the region. So they started taking this data in 1974, when around 15% of farmers in this region were identified as Hispanic and Latino. Since then, in the most recent ag census that we had, which was at 2012, more than 70% of farmers identify themselves as Hispanic or Latino farmers, which is a very interesting dynamic. If you just look from 1940, we have actually lost quite a number of farms. The farms have increasingly gotten larger, but the most interesting dynamic here is they've gotten a lot more diverse, run and operated by Hispanic farmers who bring with them their own language, their own culture, their own ways of knowing, and really adds to the diversity of this region. And so farmers are pretty much at the heart of food systems everywhere. I think they are worth giving the attention they need to succeed. But if we just look at the current statistics about farms across the country, we know that farmers across the country are getting older. They have a higher risk of suicide than the general population, and they're getting increasingly endangered by the dwindling capacity and support and recognition from their communities. Right? These farmers are around the age of 60. You're finding fewer and fewer young people who are willing to farm, and you're finding fewer and fewer young people who are willing to study agriculture and degrees related to agriculture. Farmers are at a great risk for weather and natural disasters and other things that most of us may not really think about. And so these are things that we know are big risks to farmers and ways that we have to think about ways to support them. It doesn't help that what we see in the natural environment on the resources that farmers depend on, these resources are increasingly threatened. They're threatened from overexploitation and also threatened from competition for other uses. We know that fresh water is a very limited resource and probably the most limiting resource we have in the Rio Grande Valley. And not to mention, but I think it's well documented that we've seen a great loss of biodiversity, both in birds, insects, pollinators, and especially those beneficial insects that farmers require to really have healthy fruit, a healthy farm. They say 70% of things that we consume require pollination, and we're losing those insects that do those services for us at a tremendous rate. This is part in due to this kind of increasing dependency on chemicals that we see in farming. And Kara Kroger from NCAT talked about this yesterday. Some of those chemicals are also threaten the health and well-being of farmers and consumers. We work with one farmer, for example, who says he spends about 100 to 120 dollars per acre on herbicides per year. And so any way that we can help that farmer decrease his dependency on those herbicides while maintaining or sustaining his output is something that would not only help the environment, but also help his bottom line. So these are kind of two of the key points of food systems. But when you think about it, the consumers and communities are a big part of this equation. Unfortunately, here in the Rio Grande Valley, despite being recognized as a mecca for agriculture and a hot spot for the production of fruit and vegetables, we are seeing increasing rates of food insecurity and poor food access in our region. And this is, of course, also exacerbated by these high rates of diabetes and high rates of obesity. And in fact, our region ranks among the top in these two statistics in our nation. Of course, poverty rates have only gotten worse, and income inequality also has gotten worse in our region and in other farming regions of the United States. And this is also not helped by the fact that young people more and more are moving away from careers related to agriculture. We heard Hernan Colmenero from IDEA talk about how some students think that you can't grow pizza, right? And so these are some of the things that we see happening in front of us. And this is what's going to continue to happen if we just kind of follow the business as usual in our food systems. So the question we asked ourselves at UTRGV is, how do we, as an academic institution, respond to these needs and to help address and support farmers and our food system? Really, yes.
Sorry, can you please change your settings? Because we're seeing like your note view.
Oh, okay.
Up at the top, up at the top, it says display settings. Click on that and then swap them.
Okay, display settings. Swap.
Yes.
Was this one here?
Yes.
Is that better?
That's great.
Awesome. I apologize. I'm sorry. Thank you for the reminder. So the question, I think, is we've asked ourselves, what does it really mean to be a Hispanic serving institution and to become a one, right? And I think UTRGV is perfectly and ideally situated to become the premier Hispanic serving institution just because of the region in which we find ourselves, right? In the region which has the highest concentration of Hispanic farmers in the entire country. So, most of you guys may not know this, but UTRGV is a new institution, although we have the fingerprints of our legacy institution of UTPA and UT Brownsville. But we really decided that at the heart of the mission of our institution, to really try and get our students to succeed, we needed to engage our community. We needed to do research that's relevant to our region, and we needed to focus on things that improve the health and well-being and sustainability of our region. That's what it really meant. So in terms of thinking about the food system, if you just kind of play with my schematic here, we're really trying to figure out how do we connect these different components in a way that really kind of helps strengthen each of these aspects. How can we ensure the conservation of natural resources and soils to help farmers, and how do we support farmers to help implement these practices, and also to get food to our communities. So the first, I'm going to share with you just some steps that we did in the evolution of our institution since I got there, as one of the first faculty working on ag, and how that played out, and where we find ourselves in currently here at UTRGV. The first key step, I think, is that engagement part. You saw that was one of the pillars of our educational philosophy here at UTRGV. When it comes to doing ag, we actually invite the participation of farmers to set research agendas. And maybe at other institutions, you don't find this. Often research agendas are being set by industry or being set by large organizations, conglomerate, multinational organizations. Here, our approach has always been start with the farmer first as a foundation of food systems, support them in any way. What you're seeing here are some pictures that we had very early on of a workshop with farmers who were interested in transitioning to organic ag. And these were not farmers yet who were certified organic, but who wanted to try and transition there. We asked a lot of questions. We spent a lot of time asking farmers questions, helping them answer questions that they might have had, and also identifying what those questions were and what the needs were. You can see that we continue to do that work by interacting with farmers, in the field, bringing them, to our facilities, asking them questions, genuine questions about what do farmers need to succeed, and what do farmers need to help implement some of these practices to support them. So this is just a little schematic of one of the results of that workshop that I mentioned to you, where we asked farmers about the barriers to organic ag, and they identified some of the ones that were highlighted here, of different ones. Like the ones highlighted in yellow are kind of like the more science-based issues, like weeds and pest pressures, plant diseases, and soil fertility issues, for example. So then the next step, once you figure out what do farmers and farm food systems need, we then respond, right? Then we say, okay, well, if you want to know what pests there are in organic operations, and how to manage them, then let's do some research on that. So some of our first early projects were about identifying insect pests in organic fields and writing a guidebook about that we co-published with NCAT. Or for example, is answering questions about improving the production of aloe here in South Texas, and whether we can use the benefits of mycorrhizal fungi in improving the quality and yield of aloe. So these become like student-driven projects who get into the field and who use the opportunity to learn while addressing questions that farmers may have or present to us. Dr. Soti, who we hired, is an expert on mycorrhizal fungi. We brought her in because of this kind of need. Here's another example. You've heard from Mike Morris and at NCAT of our work on cover crops. We've done several years of different cover crop trials to a point where we understand some of the limitations and practicalities of cover crops, and we understand what was required to incentivize its implementation across the region. So as I mentioned in the commercial, this summer we're actually starting a new phase of our subtropical soil health initiative, which is mostly the demonstration of on-farm trials. This is where we practice the 5 soil health principles that you heard in the commercial, where we try to implement cover crops and reduce tillage models into the region. We have funding from the from NRCS to provide technical assistance, to provide farmers access to seeds and equipment, and then also to incentivize them with a financial payment and saying to a farmer, we appreciate your contribution to the conservation of natural resources, and we will pay you for your efforts. right? And so in this demonstration, we actually will continue our research to better understand the implications of this widespread implementation across the region, and we will learn a lot more from this. Any farmer who's interested in that, please feel free to contact me, and we will get in touch with you about getting started this summer. So that's the second phase. You engage with your partners, you listen to them, and then you respond, right? And you respond by saying, hey, you had questions about soil fertility issues in the context of organic practice or in the context of soil health. Well, let's kind of discover some appropriate solutions and technologies together. The third, and probably the most important step in the sustainability of this effort, is to reinforce this partnership. And so in the time since I was hired as the first ag-related scientist at UTRGV, I used to work for the USDA Agricultural Research Service before coming to UTRGV. Since then, they have actually hired 9 other scientists that do ag-related sciences. And in fact, this year we have an advertisement where we're searching for 3 more, including an economist, an environmental justice or social scientist, like a sociologist, and perhaps somebody in the field of sustainable energy. So, this is kind of our new faculty moving forward. These are the folks who are working with farmers, like Dr. Yamaretti, who's right here. He's working with TIPA on looking at food safety and also investigating different techniques to improve food safety, especially in organic industries. So we need the faculty to help train the next generation of scientists. And this is what that looks like. We have science students all over who go to conferences, who present at farmers meetings, who use the opportunity to learn, to contribute to the needs of food systems and farmers here in the Rio Grande Valley. I'm going to share with you some more pictures here of students. We place them in internships. We have internship programs with USDA. We have an internship program with NRCS. We have an internship program with the Customs and Border Patrol Ag Specialists program. And so we actually even place students in industry. And so we've been trying to get students to have practical experience so that they can stay in ag-related careers. And these are students mostly from our region. We have created 2 new degrees. We have a master's degree in agriculture, environmental, and sustainability sciences. That started in spring of 2018, and currently we have 60 master's students in that program. It's the fastest growing graduate program at the university. The demand has actually been so intense that we had to hire new faculty to meet that demand. In 2019, we launched a new degree in sustainable agriculture and food systems. That is a new bachelor's degree. It has different concentrations, including certificates, for example, in soil science, including a certificate in GIS, which I know was mentioned as an important skill. And so what we're trying to work on currently are articulation agreements with South Texas College, with Austin Community College, who also offers a similar degree, as well as with other high schools in our region who are now starting ag science related programs in high school. So you heard from Hernan Colmenero, but we also have Mission in ISD. McAllen ISD is starting an ag science program. PSJA, Far San Juan, is starting an ag science program, because what we're trying to do is to build a pipeline of students who want to enter these careers related to agriculture. And so not through just articulation, but what I do every summer is I invite 25 science teachers from all across the valley. We got folks last time from all the way from Hebronville, who come to UTRGV 4 consecutive Fridays in the summertime to learn about different careers related to agriculture. We visit different research centers. We introduce them to different agencies who talk about these opportunities. And we also offer them continuing education credits so that they can maintain their status as a teacher at their schools. We spend the afternoons learning about curriculum plans so that we can so that students, instead of learning about, just to give you an example, instead of learning about lynxes and in Minnesota, they learn about ocelots in the Rio Grande Valley. Instead of learning about soybean production and corn in Iowa, as an example, we learn about corn production and sorghum here in the Rio Grande Valley, to try and use local examples to reinforce the importance of agriculture in our region. I'm going to skip over a couple here of pictures. This is not possible without the support of other organizations who have the same mission, right? So we work with farmers, we work with agencies like Southern SARA, with granting agencies like USDA, and who help us reinforce this relationship. And you see that in the culmination of today's conference, for example, where we are. This is the third time we've offered it. The first time online, but I think this is just an example of how we reinforce the relative roles that we have in our food system. I wanted to share with you the couple of other things. I mean, for some of you guys who are here pre-pandemic, this was in January 2020, about a year ago, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, which is one of the largest think tanks, organizations in the country about sustainable ag, came to the Rio Grande Valley to have their annual meeting. And you can see this, right? You can see how impressed these people are about coming here. And I'll read this to you. They're so impressed by students and their community-facing action research on farming, resource management, and food systems. So these are all things that faculty are helping students work with community, and then the community are facing other communities and sharing their work, right? So this is the kind of the final component here of this reinforcement of that relationship. And I will have to share with you is that UTRGV has now started our own small education research farm in a partnership with a church. We actually call the farm the Hub of Prosperity. We've borrowed the logo from 1915. We actually have the permission of the Museum of South Texas History to do that. And it's a spot where we envision a new system of where we can combine the efforts of an institution like UTRGV with the community and with the expertise of farmers across the region. So in this example, you see students actually able to practice some of the things that they learn about in class and actually implement it to the benefit of their community, which is what I'm trying to share with you today. And this is a vision that we have about our role as a Hispanic serving agriculture institution, and then also our philosophy about how agriculture, the future of agriculture is about diversity. We hear about it from our presenters today, like Dr. Megan talked about ground diversity of plants in the ground. You hear about Kara Kroger talk about gut diversity, but really what it is that at the center of agriculture moving forward has to be diversity. This is a picture of some of the students that were involved just in my lab over the last 6 years. And all of these students are still doing their work related to agriculture and the environment. We've got students doing their PhDs. We've got students that are working in high schools, starting ag programs in those high schools. We got lecturers here in community colleges, and we've got students that come from all over the world to learn about our region, and from our region, from the farmers and the resource folks from our region. And so I'd like to end with that note. And I'll leave my contact information here because I do know that there are some students out there who might be interested in some of this work, or even for farmers who are willing to collaborate with us on one of our many programs. I am just one of those faculty of the 9 or 10 faculty that are working in this realm. But if you have any issues regarding agricultural, sciences or agricultural studies that you think that the university can help, that is our job. All that we can hope to be is someone that can provide kind of scientific capital and student capital to this, and to also help perpetuate the future of the food system here in the Rio Grande Valley. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you, and thank you for joining on this wonderful conference.
Thank you, Alex, for being here, for being with us, and for all the work you do with SARA. At SARA, I know we've benefited from working with and getting to know the students that come out of your department. And at the same time, we've been able to have them interact with farmers on our side. And I'll tell you this, I'll say what you said, they were super impressed with what they've seen and how they interact. And it's been a real pleasure, a great partnership. We do have a few questions. The first is, as farm ownership in the RGV becomes more diverse, do you notice any overall changes in what is being grown or the approach to farming in general?
Yeah, so, I didn't mention this, but the Rio Grande Valley has actually become recognized in the state of Texas because we have the highest concentration of organic farms in the entire state. Now, we're talking 10, 12, 14 operations, but it actually has grown since the time that we started our work here. At that time, we actually only had 2 certified organic farms. They were both citrus groves, and part of that early wave of organic that happened in the state of Texas in around the 1980s. And then since then, we had none. And from that period, we've had anywhere from another 10 to a dozen farms join as certified organic operations, which is a tremendous change in the way that people practice agriculture. But there are still, hundreds. There are dozens of other smaller farms that are also trying to practice organic principles, but maybe not as certified organic. I know of several across the region, around Bayview, here in kind of the Upper Valley, that are also doing kind of more sustainable practice on farm. But we're also seeing, for example, large scale farmers who are interested in transitioning or who are interested in decreasing their own dependency on external inputs and external companies, right? So these are farmers who, anytime there's a shift in a global market, they feel it, right? And how they feel sometimes trapped onto planting things where the seed price is predetermined, the inputs required to grow it are all predetermined, and then the price at which they sell it is also predetermined. So any fluctuations in there, all of a sudden you're growing something that might not make you any money, especially if you require 1 or 2 extra applications of fertilizer or of insecticides or herbicides. I think that from ranging from small farmers, small holders, and to kind of even large farms, we're starting to see a shift in the way people think about farming because they understand the implications of the business as usual models that I talked about. I think small farmers, for example, who are more interested in local production, realize that they have an important role to support communities, right? I mentioned to you, I think it's extremely unusual that you have the county, Hidalgo County, which produces the most fruits and vegetables in the entire state, also have the highest rates of diabetes and obesity, which, a very simple part of the answer to that is to increase the uptake of fruits and vegetables. And so trying to reconnect people who grow food with people who need food, I think there's a big movement there, and we're starting to see it. And I think for a lot of young farmers who are or beginning farmers who are at that stage, I think we all sense that there is a tide that's turning in terms of our awareness of food and the implications of how we buy food and about the implications about the food we eat. And so I do see that. I do see that starting to change.
And so looking forward a little bit more, excuse me, how do you see sustainable ag in the RGV and at UTRGV? How do you see that going in the next 10 years?
Well, so the thing about sustainable ag, it's a very big, broad blanket, right? I mean, there are certain practices like, soil health practices that can be considered sustainable ag that are different from, for example, like organic ag. But I think what we're going to see, and this is just my prediction, you can use Pepe's rainfall calculator to understand that some of the projections about rainfall here in the Rio Grande Valley are that we are getting less rain, and they actually come in larger rain events, right? And so, gone are the days where you can kind of count on a shower or two in February, and then a kind of a couple of showers in October. The predictability of those systems, I think, isn't there anymore. And so some of these practices about increasing the resilience of a farm is going to just be that our hands are being forced to do that, right? And so I think what we're going to see is a little bit of that dynamic happening in terms of the need for sustainability. But I also think that there are certain actions that are being taken at a local level. I think governments, for example, realize that, we're one of the very few regions where we can actually grow food, for example, 12 months of the year, where an energetic farmer can grow food 12 months of the year. And that, for example, that there are schools who require food that they can actually start purchasing some of this food locally, right? So farm to school programs are one of the things that I know are on the tip of a lot of superintendents' tongues. And in fact, I was just on a kind of a text message thread with a colleague of mine. Actually, he's a former student of mine who's now at Mission ISD, and he has been asked by his superintendent to start a horticulture program so that they can align a early career track ag sciences program. And he's not the first. We've seen this at PSJ, we've seen this at McAllen ISD, and as well as with IDEA. What I think is happening is that these superintendents are responding to the needs of students, right? More and more students are acutely aware of the future, that they're of their future, and the requirements of trying to adjust to that future by trying to change some of the things we do now. So more and more students are getting interested in agriculture, but in different elements of agriculture, I think, into like, okay, well, yeah, I would love to be a chicken farmer, but I would love to just sell it locally, and instead of selling it cheap to some, to a corporation or to an animal factory, that I sell it for a premium price here locally. I've actually just had that conversation this morning with a young kid out of Edinburgh who's just enrolled in my sustainable ag class. So I think, for example, those are just bits of evidence that we think is the part of the trend of the demand for both sustainable ag in practice, and then also sustainable ag as learning opportunities for here in the region.
Yeah, I hear and I've seen the amount of increased interest in your program. But for those that haven't heard about your program or aren't so excited yet, how can we spark an interest among those youth to choose a career in sustainable ag or food systems?
The first thing is to get them to understand that the careers in sustainable ag and food systems are diverse, right? It's not just to be a farmer, which is probably the most noble of professions, but often you get students who, when you talk about a career in agriculture, they automatically think farm worker for various reasons, right? And so I think that's kind of the first point. And also is that I think for the adults in the room, we also have to think about this as opportunities that we can't even imagine exist for students, right? This idea, for example, of food photography, or like things that have we wouldn't even imagine 10 years ago that could be actually a paid career in this industry. And so there are a lot of opportunities, the ones that we haven't even imagined, right? Food delivery services, how important is that now with the pandemic, for example, right? So that's number one. The other thing is the simple answer too is to say, well, aside from imagination, we know that agriculture is still one of the largest and potential employers here in the region. From food specialists, food safety specialists, all the way to to ag specialists at the border as food comes in, to food safety specialists as foods get processed, all up and down the food commodity chain. There's opportunities for careers. And so what UTRGV has done is trying to link some of that into their field of study. And we actually have a program run by Dr. Rupesh Karyat where students interested in ag sciences can get an internship at the Customs and Border Patrol, one of the port of entries. We actually have an agreement with them where they work as part of the summer paid while they go to school, and they also receive credit for that as part of an internship. And so sometimes it's just about exposing students to these opportunities because most of us, and you probably, I was one of those, right? You were told and from a very early age by either your parents or your counselor that you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or some other profession that makes tons of money, right? And of course, I'm neither. But and I don't eat, and I still don't make tons of money, but I actually am in a career that I really enjoy and I can feel good about doing. And I think that's just getting the students involved in those things is important. The other thing too is that I don't think that you can point to anything else that has much more of a direct impact in our lives today than food and the production of. I firmly believe that, and I think that students, many of whom these days probably don't know the difference between a shovel and a hoe. Um, they just need an opportunity to learn and a true invitation to get them to learn. I mean, I'm not judging them. I don't know the difference between Instagram and TikTok. I mean, so you can laugh at that, but it's just an opportunity to learn. I think that's the one thing that we have to do. It can be in high school, it can be in college, or it can be much earlier than that, right? Where students get to learn that you can actually grow pizza by growing cheese, by growing tomato, by growing, getting milk to make cheese, by growing tomatoes, by getting wheat to make flour, that actually grows in a ground and not out of a box or not from HEB.
Yeah. At UTRGV, don't we have an office that kind of that helps to tie careers in USDA, any one of the diverse careers and college students?
Yeah, so we actually have several programs that are funded by different programs within USDA. Like, for example, there's a lot of grants given to us by the Hispanic Serving Institutions program that actually tries to connect students directly into careers in agriculture. But even some of the grants that we get from NRCS, the research grants or the outreach grants, some of them will even allow or encourage these kind of training opportunities for students. There's tons of them. Obviously, we're not doing a good enough job of advertising them and getting them out to like high schools and things like that. We're trying, but there are some opportunities. We are also very fortunate to have a USDA liaison, a regional liaison on our campus, Miss Ruby de la Garza, and she actually has volunteered to help students and coach them because, I mean, Jessica Paredes, who was just on earlier, knows that usajobs.gov isn't the most user-friendly website. And in fact, there are little tricks that you can do to improve the way that you are competitive for these positions. And Ms. De La Garza in our office meets with students one-on-one and helps them formulate their resumes and their applications and their registrations onto USA jobs. We offer workshops often, but then again, sometimes all it needs is a genuine invitation to individual students, and we do that. We try that very genuinely.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thanks for all those thoughts and words and all the information you gave us. Again, we'll put your contact information, and we can put Ruby's contact information in the chat box for any students, any parents, grandparents, theos who are on and think that their students would like to go this route. Congratulations on all the hard work and all the accomplishments of your department.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to this audience. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.